Tilapia has become probably the most widely farmed fish in the world. Over 140 countries have reported statistics. As you've heard, China is the biggest producer. They're also the biggest consumer and biggest exporter. Other countries with big tilapia industries include Indonesia, Egypt, Philippines, Thailand, Bangladesh, Brazil, and many others in Latin America and parts of Africa. And then just another graphic just to give you an idea of the proportion of tilapia production in different countries. And then this is my best estimate of what the global tilapia production is. And here I'm putting not only the Nile tilapia, but also the red strains of tilapia, aureus, and the farmed Mozambique in some places. So this is including all of the tilapias in this graphic here. But we still see a lot of production increases in tilapia in different countries. India is probably the newest important player, and I think has a lot of potential. You have a lot of water, labor, still a lot of land. Most of the feed ingredients can be produced here in India, and the government now has regulations in place to encourage the industry to continue to grow in a responsible manner. Again, as we've heard, tilapias, like most of aquaculture, the vast majority occurs here in Asia, with tilapia being following that same trend. My first trip to India was 10 years ago when MPETA invited me to talk about bringing tilapia into India. What should be done to regulate it? What would be the best breeds? What would be the best production systems? And so back in 2009, there were only a few hundred tons of tilapia being farmed in the country. But the growth has really been rapid. Estimates this year of around 20,000 metric tons, with a growth rate still of 10 to 15% per year. So I think it's going to continue that way for quite a while. But when we start talking about growing tilapia in the hinterlands, there's several questions that anybody who's serious about tilapia needs to ask and answer. Where and how are you going to market the tilapia, which has already been addressed? Which production system will you use? Will you buy fingerlings or try to do your own hatchery? Which diets, feeds are you going to use? How are you going to harvest? Are you going to do any processing of the fish? And what about the environmental aspects of the fish? Marketing being probably the single most important question that anybody who's going to do any aquaculture, but in particular here, tilapia. You're going to sell into local markets. You're going to sell whole or fresh, gutted. Are you going to sell to restaurants or grocery stores? Or are you going to go to some kind of seafood wholesaler, a fishmonger? Are you going to sell into domestic Indian markets, or are you going to try to export? All really important questions that you really should have answered before you start putting in a whole lot of fish. This is one of my favorite photos of marketing of tilapia in Sonora, in Mexico. And just a pickup truck with a live tank just drove into a big shopping mall and sold everything right from the back of the truck live. In Vietnam, this is very common in lots of grocery stores to see live tanks of tilapia. Production systems. Where are you going to grow your fish? What are the legal restrictions there? Are there environmental restrictions? Do you have to screen your discharge? It has to go into settling ponds, all these kinds of things. Where's your water supply? Are you going to use tube well water? Are you going to use river water, rainwater? How much volume? What's the quality? The temperature? Other uses of the water. Can you sell your tilapia water to somebody to irrigate? Would you use it for hydroponics, recreational lake? You're going to do fee fishing, pay fishing. So then when we decide what kind of pond, you're going to do a semi-intensive pond that's going to have some paddle wheels. You're going to be a lined pond. All these questions need to be answered. A lot of tilapia are grown more intensively in fiberglass tanks or concrete tanks above ground or built down into the ground. Are they going to have oxygen, liquid oxygen, paddle wheels, blowers, all kinds of production systems that are out there. In California, we have some of these really big concrete tanks. They're only 1 meter or 2 meters deep, but they may be 100 meters across. But in the desert areas, these are quite popular. We have several farms that use these type of systems. Or a raceway system. These are common in the U.S. to use raceway systems. In Mexico, we use a lot of raceway systems as well. This is one farm we helped build in Brazil with a whole series of raceways so that each side had 3 raceways with a vertical drop of about 1/2 meter on each side. And then this all water went into a reservoir in a dam that could be used for hydroelectric power. Indoor systems with recirculating systems are popular in the U.S. and Europe for tilapia, sometimes in greenhouses with different variations of biofilters, mechanical filters for these tilapia systems. So just some examples of what you might consider for especially in the drier parts of India, southern India, where you might be able to integrate into an existing irrigation district with semi-intensive ponds or maybe above ground ponds that would take the water, rear your tilapia, and then irrigate your crops. In other cases, you may use production in canals or in the reservoirs with cages. You may try to do fertilized ponds where you get a big algae bloom, zooplankton, and then just add supplemental feed as they get older. This is very common in Israel. A lot of the kibbutz in Israel use a green water system and then pelleted feed later on. And then whether you're going to use a complete diet with a good formulation or whether you're just going to use a supplemental feed that maybe just has a good carbohydrate mix and then get their primary productivity from the pond. In the northern parts of India, you may need some greenhouse cover in the winter if you want to keep your growth rates up. Most people here are going to be using the Nile tilapia for their systems. This was a project in Raichur where they're using small ponds and tanks, and then all the discharge was going to settling ponds and then used for irrigation. This is a project I had in southern Mexico, but again, kind of a community project where we had relatively low-cost tanks that we built, and then using aquaponic beds. So we took the water from the fish, and then we grew peppers, cucumbers, other crops with the water from the fish. Very, very simple systems, but the community could grow the fish, the vegetables, and have ready markets right there. Here in India, I think there's going to be a lot of interest in doing tilapia as another fish to add with the major carps in polyculture systems. Another system that is popular in Bangladesh, Myanmar, maybe here in India, would be to do it in polyculture with poultry. Build the poultry house over the pond, all the waste drop down, causes an algae bloom, then you get the zooplankton, and the fish will graze on the algae and the zooplankton. Or you may just do a monoculture of tilapia, where you can get your fish up to 700-800 grams without any problem. They grow very quickly. And again, using the effluent to irrigate crops from an intensive or semi-intensive system. We've done a lot of this in Arizona, and just as an example, you can see the olive trees that just got the well water compared to the olive crops that were grown with the tilapia effluent, with much bigger plants, a lot more growth on the trees. And then just a graphic, again, showing the data of how much quicker the trees grew with the effluent, just to show the farmers how much fertilizer value there can be in this aquaculture effluent. If you've got a larger irrigation reservoir, it's a great place to grow fish in cages, but of course you need to be sure you get whatever permits, decide what type of cage system you're going to use. The trade show has got several really good examples of cage systems that I recommend everybody to visit. Stock with either the Nile tilapia or the red tilapia. In cages, in reservoirs, you're going to have to use a complete diet. There's not enough productivity in a reservoir to feed the fish. And you're either going to need to put the fish in a place that's got a really good flow or move the cages on a regular basis. But these are quite common around the world now to do tilapia in cage systems, in reservoirs. And either big cages or multiple small cages. Tall Lake in the Philippines is a classic example where they put a lot of cages. Originally, without enough regulation, they put too many cages in, the water quality went down, and they eventually had to take out about half the cages. But it needs to be regulated so that this can be a sustainable system. In the brackish water areas, integrating with shrimp farms is a really good system. I recommend using the red tilapia because they do really well in the brackish waters. There's several variations. One problem that you can run into is that you get some marine parasites that can get on the tilapia in brackish waters. So you may need to do a freshwater dip occasionally to shock the parasites, get them to drop off the fish. One of the advantages of this is you can market your tilapia with the shrimp. We've done a lot of this in Indonesia. We've put together the calendar so we know when to put in the fish, when to put in the shrimp, when to harvest each. And the only problem is if you have them loose in the same pond, at harvest time you get a real mix of fish and shrimp, a lot of labor involved in separating them out. So we recommend that you actually keep them separate. In Ecuador, we had tilapia in ponds, and we did shrimp in a greenhouse complex, which worked really well. In Thailand, it's more common to do in cages, or as Celine showed now, even a sequential polyculture system where you take the waste from the shrimp ponds, put that into tilapia ponds, the tilapia clean up the water with the algae, and then the water can be used back into the shrimp, become more and more popular. In the Philippines, they use these hopper nets in the middle of the shrimp ponds with rotation, and then the waste from the shrimp pond just goes to the center They don't even feed the fish. They just live on the production, waste from the shrimp, any dead shrimp, molts from the shrimp. Again, one of the important things is decide what breed of shrimp you're going to use. Whether you use a cold water tilapia, a fast-growing Nile tilapia, hybrids, red strains, all very important decisions to make. And then obviously, whether you're going to produce your own fry and fingerlings or buy from a government or a commercial hatchery, which is obviously going to be very, very important. The Niloticus is by far the most common tilapia here in India as well as globally. The blue tilapia is used in areas with really low temperatures in the winter where they can survive the cooler temperatures. Mozambicus is the tilapia that was brought to India many years ago, back in the 1950s and 60s. They became wild. They have a poor reputation because oftentimes they get off flavors from algae blooms. And so this is why it's very important that people differentiate these improved varieties of red tilapia or Nile tilapia that are grown in controlled systems, controlled farms that are tested for off flavors, and you don't have these problems. Again, if you're going to grow in brackish water systems, I always recommend doing the red tilapia. They've been bred for salinity tolerance. They do much better in brackish or even seawater systems. And this is basically saying a lot of the same things. One of the most important things that still needs to be done here in India is to improve the marketing and the advertising of tilapia. And there's so many different ways that this can be done. These are just some examples of having festivals or parades or bringing in social groups to see the farm. Doing lots of advertising, putting it on the packaging. This is my Toyota truck back in Arizona with my tilapia license plates. Delivery trucks that have got nice advertising with phone numbers. These friends of mine in Texas, they did a quarter of their marketing driving around and people saw the phone number on the car. They just called over and said, hey, I'm parked next to you. Where are you going next? Can I buy some tilapia? So anything you can do to advertise is great. Cooking festivals. We had an international tilapia conference in the Philippines, and the Filipinos are better at tilapia parties than any place in the world. They organized cooking contests. They got the food writers from the local newspapers, radio, television, newspapers come in, and we had a big cooking contest in the middle of a mall. It was great advertising. And so we've also done gastronomic festivals where we would get 10 or 12 restaurants to all do their different tilapia recipes, and then we'd have the customers go around over several days to try the different dishes and then rate them and put it in the newspaper. Great free publicity for the restaurants and the farmers who supplied the fish. One of the great things about tilapia is all the byproducts, especially the skins. And so with tilapia, you can do all kinds of great things. You can get tilapia waistcoats made out of tilapia. The belts, the wallets, the caps. Okay. This one I'm not really going to model for you. It's a tilapia bikini. But honestly, in Brazil, Thailand, lots of places now, the tilapia leather has become a really important side industry. Belts, wallets, purses, all kinds of things. So tilapia has been growing 5, 6, 7% a year for many years. I think there's a bit of a lull that's coming because of some bad information that's on the internet. Also, the tariff trade war with China. Right now, there's a 30% tariff on tilapia from China coming into the U.S. So tilapia consumption in the U.S. is down. The Chinese are not growing as much tilapia. So, but I think this will turn around, one, as soon as Trump is out of office, but also as other countries continue to produce more tilapia. One important thing is that the prices of tilapia have been really very stable for a long time. I think this is because of the variety of different ways that tilapia can be farmed, the variety of different countries where they're farmed, and the fact that there's relatively few disease problems compared to salmon or shrimp where the prices keep going up and down and up and down. Tilapia has been relatively stable. So I think that's going to continue on into the future. This is basically a similar graph that just basically shows that as the production and consumption have increased considerably for a long time, the prices have actually been very stable, which just means that the demand for tilapia has been matched very closely with the supply so that the prices have stayed very stable. Now, of course, over time, that means that the real price, if you take inflation into account, has been coming down. And it's only through improvements in productivity that the farmers continue to make profits. Farm gate sales, as measured by FAO, have increased a lot over the last 20 years, from $1.5 billion to this year probably around $13 billion. In another 10 years, I expect that will double. So we still see a lot of upside potential for tilapia. It's still growing. I think it's going to need to have evolution, though. We're going to need to see the farmers continue to be more efficient. They're going to need to improve their processing, their packaging, food safety, food quality, continually have to improve. Traceability is more and more important with all seafood products, but especially things like shrimp and tilapia that are big international trade items. The environmental safeguards are going to need to be maintained and improved. More value adding is going to be important. Breaded products, fillet products, all of these kinds of things I think are especially important here in India. And nice thing about India is even in these value-added products, even if you're going to do a ready-to-eat prepared meal, frozen type meal, or microwave-ready meal, you've got all the ingredients. If you want to bread it, if you want to add rice, if you want to add mango, salsa kind of things, everything can be produced here. So get that product here. Right now in India, tilapia consumption is still less than 1 fish per person per year. It's probably less than 1 fillet per person per year. So there's a tremendous opportunity to replace 1 carp, 1 tilapia, and double or triple the demand for tilapia in India. I think another thing that you're going to see is that as you have more and more young women, especially, who are in more professional jobs and are cooking at home, they don't want to go to the wet market and get a whole fish. They're going to want to go to a grocery store and buy a fillet that's already prepared. And there's not going to be any waste. They're going to go home, put it in the oven, put it in the microwave, cook it, The only thing that goes away is the plastic wrap or the cellophane or styrofoam plate. No bones, nothing to worry about. I think this is going to drive tilapia really quickly as you start getting more and more tilapia fillets in the market. One example I want to share with you is Bangladesh. In 2002, the Bangladesh production of tilapia, again, was only a few hundred to 1,000 tons per year. Now it's over 350,000 tons. And the incredible thing about Bangladesh is they have not decreased their shrimp, their scampi, their carp, their pangasius at all. They have also increased in the same time that they've added a tremendous amount of tilapia. They've used polyculture systems, they've used intensive systems without affecting the rest of their aquaculture at all. So I think this same phenomenon can occur here in India, that the tilapia can grow a tremendous amount and still see all the other tilapia or all the other aquaculture crops continue to increase at the same time. For many years, people called tilapia the aquatic chicken because it had so many similarities to chicken. But I think in coming years, we continue to grow more and more and more tilapia. People cut back a little bit on chicken. Maybe we'll change the nickname. So hopefully chickens will have a new nickname. So I'll stop there and we'll keep time for a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kevin. It was a very interesting presentation. I think he has given a world perspective on tilapia. Yeah, it's open for questions.
My name is Shivana. Actually, I have two questions. One on the consumption side. Can you hear me? Okay, I have two questions.
Yes.
One is on the production side. That is for you. And another is on the consumption side. That is for any authority from NMDB or maybe MPEDA. So on production side, I just wanted to know, like, there is the Tilapia lake virus, which is spreading across all over the world. And that is a threat to the tilapia production. So on that side, I just wanted to know, is there any development going on to stop that virus to spread across all the farmers? And another question is, like, on the consumption side, like, is there any government initiative which they are going to do for marketing for the consumption of tilapia? That's
Okay.
it. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me do tilapia lake virus. This is a virus that was discovered just, I guess, 4, 5, 6 years ago now. It's been found in many places around the world, which actually makes me believe that actually the virus has been around. And it was, once they had the diagnostics, people started finding it in different places. But in a few cases, it's been devastating, for sure. But the fact that it's been around, the fact that it has not been as devastating around the world as people thought makes me think that, one, that in some cases it was highly selectively bred fish that had not been challenged, had not had stress before, and now that they exposed to a stressor, that they were really reacting to it. Some of the more wild types of tilapia don't seem to have too much trouble, with a few exceptions. I look at it a lot like strep Inie that we had with tilapia a few years ago, where everybody thought, oh, this is going to be terrible, terrible. Well, everybody learned to manage around it. We got some vaccines out there. Nobody worries about strep anymore in tilapia. I think we're going to see the same thing with tilapia lake virus. There'll still be some hot spots around where people will lose some fish, but as in most diseases, if the fish are healthy, they're fed well, the environment's good, usually they fight off most of these infections. You may have some chronic mortality, but it's not going to be an epidemic. And I think that's what we're going to see with lake virus too. We'll see some challenges, some people do some breeding. Problem's going to be